Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the Oregon. I've finally got this thing on the live server, and it's absolutely incredible. These experimental ships have some very powerful gimmicks. This being the Georgia, but up-tiered into tier 10. You get to burst fire out 12 457s with incredible accuracy. So we're going to be printing some dev strikes today. I've played it quite a bit already since I got it. It took me a little while to get it, and it's really, really good. I think it's probably a bit too good, maybe not the hottest of take, but I was wrong a little bit in my initial impressions of this ship. On the public test server, it's never a great representation of random battles, of course. I was really critical of this burst fire. And on random battles, it's not as important, I don't think. It's still incredible, it's still very good. But the real spice of this ship is going to be this fighter flight skill, giving you incredible accuracy while also giving you amazing main gun reload is just perfect for random battles these days. Georgia, Oregon, they have 457s, and that gives you 30 millimeters of overmatch. It also gives you really good pen and high alpha damage. This ship being so accurate out to long range means you're going to have very consistent damage output, whether it be a broadside target or an angled target. I personally don't think that's as great of an idea. I don't like overmatch damage. I much prefer the broadside hits like that one. Yes, sir, 40k damage into a Lepanto. That's what I'm talking about. This is a ship that is really, really good if you're the one playing it. Fighting against it, maybe a bit too many gimmicks, I guess, but incredible start here into this game. I have so many good games. It was really hard to actually make this video. There's just so many good matches, good salvos that I have to show you. So we're going to be jumping around a little bit in this one. And poor Ibuki, perhaps the highlight of this discussion on experimental ships. What do you do if you're playing Ibuki in 2025? What if you try and play some of these older ships? I mean, that's burst fired by a Vyazma, same tier cruiser that overmatches him, and then burst fired by an Oregon. What do you do? What do you do? Not sure. I don't really understand the balancing decisions around some of these experimental ships and whether or not they were a great addition to the game. They do good damage, though, bursting out essentially a Vermont salvo, right? 6 guns, well, 12 of them is a Vermont. 12 457s is a Vermont. Yet we reload faster than him. So very easily able to out-damage a Vermont at closer range broadsides. And we still have really good DPM at these longer ranges. For some reason, the burst fire actually gives you better DPM. It is limited in its range, though. So you're going to notice a lot of these dev strikes that we're getting here are really big salvos with citadels. At longer ranges, I'm not using the burst fire. The vast majority of the time, I'm not using the burst fire. And it's really interesting to me how overstated, or how much I overstated this burst fire relative to its usefulness in random battles. I've found as I've played this ship that the burst fire is nice as a really powerful close range tool, but a lot of the time you're not getting into those closer ranges in random battles these days. And yet this ship still performs incredibly well. You know, slowing down Plymouth, these are salvos that we really want to connect really powerfully. These are salvos that I would complain about in other battleships or any battleship, a lot of cruisers as well, if I'm not getting a citadel. Here we do, using almost 20% improved accuracy. The consistency on Oregon is incredible, yet I'm going to complain a bit in this video still. A bit hypocritical perhaps, but I will be doing some complaining, and that has to do with damage into angled ships. I love a consistent battleship into broadsides. Absolutely love it. I just think we should be rewarded for angling, especially at longer ranges. At close range, I don't think a cruiser outbrawls a battleship, you know, so upper belts, bow armor, that kind of thing, overmatch. But deck armor, I mean, it's a Guden, so I don't really feel that bad, right? Given the airstrike power on that ship. But I mean, 16k? Okay, we'll send it again. Surely that was just RNG. Good luck for us. Next salvo will do quite a bit less, right? Well, no, actually, we're going to do another 15k into him. We're on low HP. That is the gimmick. But 457s? I don't know if this one needed 457s. I like the idea that these ships could have way less overmatch to gain the burst fire, to gain the accuracy consistency. We've seen that out of Wisconsin with 406s, Slava, right? This is a ship that has that level of accuracy and consistency. It just has it with even larger caliber guns. Really good into destroyers as well, by the way, with that HE. We won't be shooting a lot of HE, but very good into those DDs. While this ship is incredibly powerful, I did find some salvos trolling me, and I was wondering about that. How come a ship with such a massive accuracy buff trolls me on dispersion sometimes, even with the burst fire to get 12 shells out of there? Well, looking at it, we actually don't have the best base dispersion. I'm not trying to say this ship is balanced, but there are some things about it that aren't as good. And when it comes to dispersion, we do not have battle cruiser dispersion like a Georgia has. So our base dispersion is a battleship, and we only have 1.8 sigma, which is that tendency for those shells to go to the center of the dispersion ellipse. So it turns out this base dispersion is actually very similar to Kremlin. 1.8 sigma battleship dispersion. It's the same dispersion table as Vermont and Ohio and Montana, but they get better sigma. Oregon also doesn't have access to that 6th upgrade slot in dispersion. It comes through this fight or flight talent that is specific to these experimental ships. And that is all about reducing your HP to gain an accuracy and reload buff. So that's the challenge, right? That is the skill in playing these ships. And I really like it. I think it's a really interesting idea, but maybe not for randoms. That would be my criticism here, is this would be perfect for special game modes. This would be perfect for that respawning mode that we're going to get to play next update. Anything that is a little more gimmick heavy, a little more PvE focused, or just for fun focused. I'm not sure about these ships being in random battles. You're seeing here some frustrating salvos in on a Yoshino. We got to keep in mind that base level of accuracy. We're nearly maxing out, or at least we were before I healed, the accuracy buff here, and yet still getting a little bit of trolling going on. It's a great ship still. I mean, we're on 200,000 damage, right? How much complaining can I do? How much nitpicking can I really do over some of these things? But I do think that's what gets us killed here, is this reversing broadside. Yoshi just refuses to die, so he gets a perma double fire on us here. And it does mean also we take the Wisconsin salvo, and we're gonna go down. Still a really good game. We do manage to finish off that Yoshino with the burst. Not quite able to get Wisconsin with that burst. It's still a great game. And that's not even the best one I have to show you. I had awesome games. I had a lot of fun playing this ship. And the gimmicks are really interesting to play around. Having these super heals means you can afford to play around the low HP much, much easier. I greed it a little too hard. There's plenty of games where I actually die early, pushing in too hard, or just getting overwhelmed. These super heals are very, very powerful. I think they do 20% of your HP, so they're not a full 40% super heal like we see on like Conqueror, but still 20% of your HP is much more than the 14% that we get on a standard heal on like an Ohio or a Georgia. The cooldown being 60 seconds is 20 seconds faster than standard, although 20 seconds slower than those Ohio or Georgia. I think it kind of evens out though, given that you heal back much more, and it heals faster. 20-second heal duration, and standard heals are 28 seconds. So you can get back to reloading that healing much, much sooner. And you just have so many of them, right? You start with 5 base heals. You can take Superintendent. It's not called that anymore. I keep calling it Superintendent because that's what it was for years. 4-point skill gets you an extra heal, a little more duration on it. And then if you get 2 million potential damage, you can get a 7th heal. And you're going to heal a lot of that back. These experimental ships have a gimmick where the pen damage, they heal back 75% of all pen damage. Most ships are 50% or even less. So very useful that we get essentially all the full value out of our healing throughout a game, where a lot of other ships with super heals that aren't like British, for example, the Salem, can't really use all of its super heals. Even if you take the extra heals, you're going to notice as you play through it that you do not get the full value out of it. Yoshino caught broadside. Those torps are going to keep them locked in. Even at long range, we're going to do incredible damage. And oh man, It's a G-Nan. Yes, I saw a lot of G-Nans. Oh, and the Citadel into the Yodo. We are definitely loaded again. Our reload is so fast, and the burst fire. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do as a light cruiser against that? It is very, very difficult. Dread it to run from it. Here comes the G-Nan clips. I actually ran into quite a few G-Nans while I was playing this ship, and all of these clips you're seeing in this video today are from a single stream. I played for like 3 hours or so, and almost all the games had something to offer as far as content goes. 19 kilometers away, we're on 34,000 HP, so we got a pretty good accuracy buff, and that's pretty good dispersion. That is not Kremlin dispersion, yes. This fighter flight skill actually maxes out at 23% better accuracy. Let's remember the American-only 6th upgrade slot for accuracy. It's only on high-tier American battleships. Gives you 11%. This is 23. Although you have to be on 19,000 HP or less. So there is some risk in that. But with the super heals, you see how these gimmicks are tying together? It's fun to play. It's interesting to play. How low do you risk? Do you heal but nerf your ship, but consistently stay alive more? These are interesting decisions to make. I just don't think they're great decisions to be made in random battles against some ships from 2015. So I'm really trying hard to see the vision here and not overly just complain about all this new stuff. In fact, this is the second time I'm recording this. I watched some of my initial recording back, and I pretty much spent the entire half an hour of this video just complaining about the gimmicks. And I don't think that makes for a very good video. But I will have to do some complaining. And I think it comes down to these gimmicks all mesh so well together that it makes for a very fun ship to play. It's just any one of these gimmicks is more than enough to make a very powerful tier 10 ship. This amount of healing, we've seen that before on some ships, maybe not as consistently, but we've seen super heals before. We've seen a lot of fast heal cooldowns before, and it makes for some fun ships that can burst through or heal back, recover from a lot of HP, and push in with that. It's really cool. I think we've seen some ships with burst fire gimmicks, but they come with a massive downside, and that is either really long reloads, or you have to pay with worse accuracy or less damage at less alpha damage on those shells. These shells are just better when you're using your burst fire. The downside of this burst fire, though, is real, and probably something I've understated. And we'll get into using this burst fire more. I'm going to be brawling a Schlieffen and a Vermont soon in this game. And this burst fire is very, very powerful. It's just that you can't use it at longer ranges. And that is a big, big downside into random battles. And one that is enough to maybe offset just having this burst. If it didn't have everything else, I think it would be a very interesting design where instead of a secondary battleship, for example, like Libertad, where you have to get in 12.5 kilometers, 15 with that F key, which let's just ignore that for now. You have to get in such close range to use that special gimmick of your ship. Oregon having a burst fire at close range, meaning almost doubling the power of any single salvo at close range, would be really cool and interesting to try and get actually surviving at those closer ranges and make it work. But it's also got really, really incredible long-range capabilities as well, and the ability to tank through a lot of focus fire. This extra HP that you have from all these heals, I mean, you're healing back a quarter of your HP, nearly a quarter of your HP every time you click the heal button here, and it's very hard for enemies to actually burst you down. I had to play incredibly aggressive. I had to way overcommit into positions in order to die in this ship, or get focused down by carriers or anything like that, and the focus fire and consistent spotting that comes with that. The ship is well concealed at 13.3, but plane spotting will allow some of those longer range battleships and cruisers to finish you off. But in games like this without carriers, it's very, very hard if you're playing smart to die in these things, especially because you can just play the mid-range role where we see a lot of battleships thrive, I gotta say, in that outside 15 kilometers range where it's very difficult for cruisers to actually burn you down, whereas you have more than enough range and accuracy and overmatch to deal with them. Yes, that's maybe the other issue Poor Jacksonville. I mean, Jacksonville's very strong, let's be honest, but taking 14k damage there when he's dodging and angling, that's a lot. The other thing is these special shells. So we get a limited stock of them, and I think that is in itself is interesting. If we had limited access to this burst fire, limited access to this AP, that is interesting, where you get to pick and choose when to use the really good ammo. This gives you 11% better pen, as well as improved pen angles on the AP. Only available when you're bursting, so it has to be at close range, and you have a limited stock, so you can't just use it all game. Unfortunately, the regular AP is still able to be used as burst fire after you're out. I think that would have been an interesting balancing decision in itself, where the burst is only limited stock ammo and that is it, and then you're out of burst fire for the rest of the game. Really would have made you have to choose whether or not you wanted to use it at closer ranges. But as it stands, we still have really good standard ammo. And that's where I really find it so unfortunate. They were really close to having some very interesting design decisions, where as a player you would have to decide if you really wanted to use some of these gimmicks or not. And I think the burst fire with the special shells limited stock would have been one of them. And the other one I think is to do with the HP in this fight or flight skill. I've mostly just talked about the dispersion that you gain, which is immense. But I also gotta talk about reload and how fast this ship can reload. You just always have a 20-second or a sub 20-second reload with standard shells. We're getting close to a 25 or less second reload on the burst fire right now. That is crazy powerful. And I think it's because fight or flight contains a up to 15% main battery reload time buff. And you can take that alongside Adrenaline Rush, so you're stacking them. And while it limits you to 19,000 HP as the lower end of that buff on fight or flight, it essentially acts as a doubling up until you get to that 19% or 19,000 HP. So on half HP, you're getting the full 20% reload buff from fight or flight, giving you 10, as well as you're getting 10 from regular Adrenaline Rush. And that's a little disappointing for me because it's interesting to have to decide around your HP if you want better accuracy. I think this ship would have done well, or all these experimental ships would have done well with the removal of Adrenaline Rush as a skill to even take from these ships, as well as the removal from Reload mod. I thought it was so interesting when I got these ships and started using them to see that Oregon did not have access to that special accuracy upgrade that only high-tier American battleships get. I thought that was really cool. Made you decide on your HP. That was the whole thing. Your HP is what determines your accuracy. Cool. Then why can we still take Reload mod and Adrenaline Rush if HP is also supposed to determine our main battery reload? That's the concern here. So suddenly it just becomes a ship that has good or really good dispersion, depending on the HP, and always has a reload advantage. To have 457s with this level of reload is pretty rare. It starts off not too bad. In fact, you do have worse reload technically than the Georgia. Georgia has 26-second reload. Oregon has 27-second reload. But Georgia's always going to take that 11% accuracy upgrade. For the most part, you should be taking that. Where we're going to take the 12% reload buff, and instantly we get a reload advantage before we even count this fight or flight buff, which is a lot. I think they're really close to some interesting designs here. Maybe not even for random battles balance. I still think it's too many gimmicks, too powerful. Poor Yodo, man. Like, look at how fast we reload this. 27 seconds for a Vermont salvo, essentially. Right? Let's be honest here. 12 457s is essentially what we're firing here. That's a full Vermont salvo, and we have a sub 30-second reload there. You got to give up accuracy, and you need to give up concealment on a Vermont to even approach 30 seconds, because you got to take reload mod and then legendary mod. And typically people aren't going to be doing that. And the Oregon just gets that to start with. Not so sure about that. Brawling a Vermont here, and yes, there it is. The Confederate. I'm sure you were wondering, what's the burst reload then with Confed Halsey procced? Well, it's 21 seconds right now. So we essentially at close, and now it's at close range. I do have to keep that in mind. There are some balancing things here. There are some decisions. You only get this doubling of your salvo at closer ranges. But within that close range, you get the Vermont salvo essentially every 20 seconds once you activate Halsey like this, which is crazy. It only happened at the end of this game, which is over 300,000 damage. It racked up pretty quick there at the end, didn't it? This ship is incredible. It also does very good at long range still, too. That's the other element that I have to keep in mind here is, yes, the burst fire is cool. It's very, very powerful and would be broken if you could fire it at all ranges. But the limitation on range is a very serious downside that I needed to consider more when I was initially playing it on PTS. I was just ignoring, I guess, the current state of random battles, not really thinking about how it would translate. We will yoink ourselves a little bit of a secure, a Kraken Unleashed, and that's a pretty good game. And yet my average is pretty close to what my other tier 10 battleships look like. It's pretty close to a Wisconsin. Wisconsin is pretty busted, although let's be honest here. Bourgogne is much higher on average damage actually than Oregon so far. To be fair though, haven't played much Oregon yet, so those averages certainly could be changing. My hit rate is absolutely off the charts with this one, way higher than most battleships, especially the older ones like a Montana, for example. The accuracy is just too good. But it didn't always perform perfectly for me. I do have a couple clips to show you here yet after this game where sometimes it does troll you, and I think that has to do with the accuracy buff here having to make up for battleship dispersion table. If I do a little bit of very rough math on the dispersion at 15 kilometers comparing Georgia and Oregon, it's about a 18% difference, I think, in horizontal dispersion, as well as around a 12%-ish dispersion difference on the vertical at 15 kilometers compared to a Georgia. So this extra fight or flight accuracy buff has to make up for that. And Georgia, being a tier 9, is a very powerful tier 9, don't get me wrong. It is still a tier 9 ship. And Oregon has to compete with some pretty strong tier 10s. It certainly does that. It certainly does that. But every once in a while, I'm like, what happened there? Here's a great example of high HP and why you need to be on at least half HP, I think. Around 50,000 HP, you're getting the 11% dispersion buff you would normally take in the 6th upgrade slot. So if you can, try to stay around that 50k HP as a maximum, and that should net you some pretty consistent salvos, and anything below that is going to be much, much better. But you saw how even at close range that Ohio didn't take as much damage as we've seen in this video so far. Not every game was the perfect Dev Strike every salvo game. I got a lot of them. I got a lot more consistently than I normally do, but not every game was perfect like that. The other thing is, well, some ships just don't come with citadels, Puerto Rico being one of them, and so is Oregon, apparently, because at these ranges, he should have more than enough pen to get through us, even at these angles. And yet, I think we just took some full pens there, maybe some overpens. A bit of a tangent, but can we release ships with citadels again, Wargaming? I mean, maybe we could bring some above water citadels back. I think that would be a little more interesting than some of the Overmatch long range HE play that we're getting. But that's for another day. We only shoot one of our turrets there, as I don't want to fully use my reload on them. I want to get some shots in on this Ohio at these close ranges with our burst fire. So our turrets are a little out of sync. In this one, we're having a bit of a challenge. There's double shim on our flank, and our gearing's doing his best, but it is difficult to play. Now that the radar's gone, though, maybe you can help us out a little bit more. And okay damage, and we're bow tanking this Ohio. Usually a very dangerous proposition. This is something I do have to mention. I talk about this all the time when it comes to German battleships, but as well as Georgia in particular, has a very large superstructure. Oregon has this weakness as well. The healing just makes up for it, though. If GK had this level of healing, I don't think I'd be complaining all that much about its superstructure. Having these heals heal back so much pen damage, come back so quickly, and have so many of them, it's really, really not too bad to deal with Georgia armor, even at tier 10. At least that's what I found. But maybe that's a bit of a skill-based thing. Maybe these ships have a lot of gimmicks, but you need to be at a certain level of experience to take advantage of them. Perhaps that's something I'm missing out on as well, that Maybe these ships won't be as broken for the average player. Maybe the average Oregon or experimental ship you run into won't be that busted. I don't know. Maybe that's just cope. I'm trying to find ways that this isn't just a broken ship that I gotta complain about. I do think it's too much for random battles, though. I would have loved to see these in their own special game mode. As I've said, I think they would have been really, really fun into that. But for random battles, it's a lot. Although, hey, again, missing out on that Ohio Citadel there, a lot of overpens. And this time we did have most of that accuracy buff. Still a really good game, though. Another one over 200,000 damage. Really, really powerful ship. And one that I find fun to play for now. It's a ship with a lot of decisions to be made and a lot of potential to make plays. It's fast, it can reposition, it's really, really good at dealing consistent damage to broadsides. But I gotta wonder if this is just a novelty that's gonna wear off rather quickly, and then we gotta deal with these very gimmick heavy ships in our random battles, in a very standard ship. How do you fight against these ships with so many gimmicks in them? And is that going to be fun? Is that going to be an enjoyable random battles experience? Maybe that's part of the intention from Wargaming when it comes to the design of these ships and how they're distributed. You only get them for a limited time until 14.7, and then they're gone. That's not amazing for people who don't have any credits, obviously, because you got to spend over 40 million credits on them. So those people probably won't ever even get to play these ships, or likely won't invest the credits in them because it's essentially just wasting them kind of thing. I don't know if that's such a good idea either, to be locking out newer players or even mediumly experienced players, a couple thousand battles even. You probably still don't have the credits to throw around. Some people, veterans of the game, will, and have so many credits that doesn't really even matter to them. But is that really a good idea, to be adding events that are specifically tailored to whales and experienced players only? I think we need to look at the early game or the new player experience. Otherwise, if there's no new people coming to the game, then we're just going to get this slow drain of experienced players getting tired of the gimmicks changing the game they once enjoyed so much. But they get to remove them in a few updates. So maybe that's part of the balancing decision. You play around them. They're an interesting hazard, I guess, to play around for a bit in your random battles games, and then they're gone, and then the next set come in. That's a very, very charitable way of looking at this, but maybe that's the idea here. Another game with the with Confederate, by the way. Got below a 15-second reload when we hadn't healed, although I didn't want to mess it up, so I didn't want to greed too hard for that. So on half HP, feeling pretty comfy. I still have these special ammo shells. I just really want to point this out. Some of these shots here, I think the next burst actually, we wouldn't have an angle to get through the Georgia. You'd be too angled. But these special shells, man, full pens there, no bounces at all, no shatters, that improved pen and improved pen angles. Really, really strong at these closer ranges. The other thing I really wanted to touch on here, as we're about to be done with the clips, I know, half an hour of just one day of playing this ship. So many clips. What if Wargaming's looking at the reception to premium ships and new content to the game and realizing that people just don't care about certain ships if they're not incredibly gimmick focused or incredibly broken? What I'm talking about is Gonzaga and Monmouth. I think the reception to those ships has been pretty clear. They're not interesting enough to warrant spending so much money. And I do not disagree with that at all. In fact, I would agree with that completely. They're very expensive for ships that are... Gonzaga I find pretty interesting, but it's too much money. Way too much money to be spending, in my opinion. And maybe that's why we're seeing a lot more of these powerful gimmick-heavy ships coming into the game. Wargaming wants to get people excited about new content, so they see people not as excited about more vanilla ships, and then they overdo it with the gimmicks. I don't know, just a theory. But it sure seems like the ships that get the most attention coming into the game recently are the very gimmick-heavy ones. And I see that on the YouTube views as well. Certainly experimental ships, but also new lines that are very strong but focused around a gimmick that is unique and, let's be honest, very powerful. Libertad line, Utrecht line with with those airstrikes, ships like Inshin, where you take a Des Moines with improved accuracy, DD accuracy, and give it a smoke. Very, very powerful ship, very interesting. Hull, for example, very, very interesting ship that got a lot of views on that video and a lot of people talking about the game and interested in getting it. But the more vanilla ships get a little bit less. Not that that's a bad thing for the channel or whatever, but it's something, it's just one data point that I can see as well. And I don't know what the solution is to that, right? For wargaming, right? I don't know the solution to that. How do you manage that? And it's a 10-year-old game, so power creep is probably a little bit inevitable in such an old live service game. But I don't know if these experimental ships are it. I was not really considering, and I'm really glad you guys spoke up and told me that you weren't considering these experimental ships purely off the cost of them, and that cost would then be completely removed from your account. You spend all this credits, maybe doubloons, to get these ships for a little bit, and then it's gone. And that's why some of you aren't interested in these ships at all. And I hadn't properly considered that. And it makes perfect sense. Makes complete sense to me, especially if you're lower on credits or you don't want to spend, 20,000 doubloons was the cost to get through everything. If you wanted to buy your way through. That's not cheap. That is not cheap for something that is going to be removed from your account. At least the early access to new lines, well, you get the early access for 2 months. That's what you're paying for. But it never gets removed from your account because it's just a new line in the game, I guess. And I hope Wargaming reconsiders these experimental ships. I like some of the concepts here. I don't think they're fully baked. I think the idea behind this special talent fighter flight is really interesting. Really interesting design decision. Forces a player to be greedy to get the maximum value out of the ship, even more so than normal, like a normal adrenaline rush. But like, it's risk reward play. I love that kind of thing. It's really interesting. But I don't think we should have the option to take main battery mod 3 here. I really don't. I like the idea that all your dispersion upgrades are based on this skill. But also your reload should be based on that skill too, right? Otherwise, we just get a ship with incredibly quick reload, and you're stacking that with this adrenaline rush talent as well. So that's how we get ourselves down to like a 15-second reload on more accurate Georgia guns. And that's not particularly great to play against. Playing it's pretty fun. Here's the build that I was using, by the way. Brisk certainly is a great skill, and probably better. I just find myself with a lot of planes in my vicinity. I don't know if you guys can relate to that, but this 40% cooldown is really nice in those situations. All the airstrikes, all the carriers these days, at least there's some advantage there. And since we heal back so much, 75% pen damage, and these heals are very impactful, I want to get to them quicker. And then getting the 7th heal, that's why we're taking these skills. Concealment, obviously, we want to be surprising people. Playing that mid-range, just outside 13.3 kilometers is kind of the sweet spot. If you're not going in for the burst, like just early game, playing it safer, that 15-kilometer range is really, really good. And then I'm taking super heavy AP. Gotta be a little bit greedy, right? And get that alpha damage, nearly 17,000 alpha damage. Of course, Gunfeeder is really good. Didn't talk about it much, but your HE is unnerfed, right? This is a ship that has high HE alpha damage, good fire chance, and good armor pen with good accuracy. And it can burst salvos at close range into DDs, so having the upgraded Gunfeeder here means you can almost always swap over to the HE, take the time to do that, and get a nasty salvo into a destroyer at close range. Really, really powerful stuff. Also here we take main battery mod 2, not taking secondaries, and that really comes down to this ship doesn't have the improved secondary accuracy that Georgia has. There are some downsides, there are some changes. It's not perfect copy of a Georgia, and this is one of them. It doesn't have the secondary accuracy, so do not build into this. But given the burst fire at close range, I don't think you need much more help at those closer ranges. And armor-wise, it is still just a Georgia. 38 is pretty good, but 32 mil bow. And then your Citadel is below water, or at least waterline. And that's why it's so hard to Citadel so many ships these days. I don't know if they would ever, I don't think they'll ever do it, honestly, but I would love to see, just for a patch, or even a special game mode, where they made everyone have their Citadels up high again. Bring back the old American Citadel height and give everybody a large above water Citadel and see what happens, man. Maybe do that, and then buff cruisers to have improved deck armor. You know, playing Castilla the other day, that was kind of my idea there, where if more cruisers had deck armor that could auto bounce battleship shells, 40 mil deck armor, there wouldn't be as much of that long range random 15 to 30k salvo that you're angled to. That's so frustrating to deal with. And I think that might help too. I don't know. I've got ideas, but they're probably not going to work out in practice, and that's okay. For now, though, that is going to do it on the Oregon. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you think in the comments down below if you've been playing this ship. It's very interesting to see the difference between PTS and live. I was very concerned about these ships. I'm still surprised they made it to live server in random battles in particular. They're even in, I think you can even take them into clan battles. Certainly ranked Vyazma is a terror right now. It's tough, man. That poor Ibuki player, that's all I'm thinking about. That poor, I mean, G-Nan players too, but playing an Ibuki into Vyazma Oregon that just both burst you and you're insta dead, they both overmatch you. What an experience, man. I don't know, man. But again, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching. I tried my best to not just complain about these experimental ships in this video. Hopefully I succeeded. My first recording of this was like half an hour of just whining. I'm not going to show that. I hope this one was a little bit better, a little more entertaining, and more informative. Trying to see both sides of the coin on these ships, because I do like some of the design. I really do. I enjoy this game, and I love the decision making that some of these experimental ships bring. It's just not fully baked, in my opinion, and not fully balanced against some of those older ships. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.